The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the Churchville Schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the Civil War era. Students of today walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm of the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville Schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons. And children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are practiced, and students test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess featuring games of the early 1900s. The schoolhouse is a popular place for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can also be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst Historical Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information. Call 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. The Churchville Schoolhouse is waiting to open the doors for your school or community group. Plan a memorable learning experience today for the best education in history.
Welcome to the first Elmhurst Time Travelers of 2015. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and today we've got an exciting program because we'll be talking about a brand new Elmhurst history exhibit at the Elmhurst Historical Museum called, By All Accounts, The Story of Elmhurst. And to discuss that new exhibit, we have Brian Berghager, the director of the museum, and Lance Tauser, the curator of exhibits. And gentlemen, where'd that title come from?
Well, I guess you can blame me. We actually batted a lot of them around. We were looking for something that we felt kind of encompassed some of the approach to the exhibit, and it was kind of the one that rose to the top of a lot of different ideas. But one of the reasons why we kind of went with it is because we're taking kind of a unique approach to the exhibit, and we're using personal accounts as part of that approach.
Refresh our audience with the exhibit that was there for 28 years, its name and its structure, and then contrast it to what the new exhibit will be like.
Sure. The Visions of Home exhibit was installed in the 80s as part of the city's bicentennial celebration, no less, and it approached the history of Elmhurst chronologically. It was a wonderful exhibit at that time that told the story of Elmhurst from the settlement period up through the mid-1980s. And of course, since that time, a number of things have happened in Elmhurst, as we all know. And there have also been reinterpretations of things in the past and new perspectives that we've brought to the history of Elmhurst. So when visitors come see the By All Accounts exhibit, it's going to be quite a bit different than the Visions of Home experience that they may have had.
Now, recalling the previous exhibit and having been up there many, many times, it was the classic sort of wander through and look at things and read what they were, and as you said, chronological order. It sounds like by all accounts, will be quite a bit different.
Yeah, actually, I agree with Brian that it was a traditionally designed exhibit. It was a great showcase of some of the materials in our collection. It took a very traditional linear approach to interpreting history, chronological. It took sort of a passive approach where there were artifacts sort of clustered together by era that weren't necessarily interpreted. They were identified in most cases, but not necessarily interpreted. So, our approach, we realize that people experience and learn in lots of different ways. So we wanted to have sort of materials in our exhibit so that people that like that traditional linear experience can find that there. But also in this day and age where information comes at you relatively quickly and people are sort of engaging in different ways, we decided to take a little bit different approach as well. So we've combined a couple of different of approaches to our exhibit. So someone coming through our exhibit will experience some of those similar themes that Brian just talked about that were reflected in the previous exhibit, Visions of Home, redone, restylized, and updated, really. But a big core part of the exhibit will be more of a thematic approach. So we took sort of cultural life history in Elmhurst and broke it into themes. And we started with a rather long list of themes. I think it was about 18 when we narrowed it down to 18. And there was never going to be enough room in our gallery space for 18 different exhibit elements. So we further compartmentalized those into these themes, these sections that utilize both objects from our collection, interpretive information from our research, as well as personal accounts from people who lived here in Elmhurst. And so these things are clustered together in kind of unique sort of structural elements that are approached from all sides. And people will learn about these themes and learn history through these objects and through these accounts.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more about the new exhibit and its nifty bells and whistles, but I want to step back again for just a moment and talk just a second about, I know, Brian, you've been with the museum 25 years plus, and you've been around 6 years now. So first, I guess I'll address this to you. Did you believe that the opportunity to create an entirely new Elmhurst exhibit, was that on the forecast map when you arrived?
Well, when I first started, we had grander ideas, but this really was pulled together by the unique and heroic efforts of our foundation, the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation. Really kind of took this project on, realizing that Visions of Home had more or less run its course. And there was this sort of opportunity to do a campaign and have a singular focus to a campaign. And we tried to provide them with materials that would help them in their campaign. And they really hit it out of the ballpark. I couldn't be more pleased. I think when we first started talking about the numbers that it was going to take, and we also decided that we were going to kind of keep it all in-house. We were going to make the most of this money rather than just hire a big firm to sort of come in and clean house. We just made that decision to sort of do it all within house so that we could make even more changes with the money and stretch it as far as it could go. So I would say when we first started the campaign, I thought, they seem really serious about it. I'm really behind them, and I'm going to try to do whatever I can to help them. And then when they first started getting some of those bigger chunks and some of those little ceremonies that we were doing, I have to say, I was the guy in the corner smiling and going, this is going to be great. This is going to be amazing for everybody, and it's going to happen. So they never wavered, and I think it's a great tribute to very dedicated residents of our town that made this happen.
So Brian, let's go back to that though. Mm-hmm. The Heritage Foundation has been in place since roughly 2007. I believe that's the year. And its primary responsibilities, advocacy, and fundraising. I mean, the foundation does other things. When do you recall the first serious discussion about we need a new exhibit, we need to update minimum, new exhibit better, and we can do this? When do you recall that starting?
Well, I think we've talked on and off through the years about replacing the Visions of Home exhibit and making it a more engaging experience based on visitor expectations today. And it was really about 3 years ago, I think, we started talking a little bit more at the staff level. And the Heritage Foundation, as Lance mentioned, was our partner, and truly a great partner in this project. And I was extremely pleased when I took the idea to the board of using this exhibit as the board's first capital campaign. And now the Heritage Foundation, as you said, came about in 2007. It was a reorganization that actually took place at that time. And we have a number of great individuals from the Elmhurst community who are involved. They're leaders in the community on their own. And they came together through the Heritage Foundation board and became enthused about this idea. They felt it was not only worthwhile, but they felt it was achievable. And they, I think, also saw it as an opportunity to step up their game, just as we were stepping up our game at the Historical Museum. And that's exactly what occurred. The Heritage Foundation looked at it hard, and I think they looked at it realistically, because our campaign goal was $300,000. This was an organization that had never done a capital campaign before, so this was a first. And we looked at our donor base. We looked at the potential to grow that donor base. We looked at how we were going to achieve that $300,000 goal in a realistic way, very realistic way. And the board at that point came together, debated that issue, and got behind the project. And I'd have to say the first people on board as donors were these board members. Each and every board member got behind that project financially, and that was absolutely important to where we were headed with our capital campaign. So I applaud the board for doing the right homework, but also for stepping up at the beginning and launching this.
Yeah. I think too, I think it's very important for our audience to understand. The museum, which of course is owned and operated by the city of Elmhurst and tax supported. But this new exhibit, and we're going to talk about its increased size and other things about it, but this new exhibit, totally funded by private dollars generated through the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation and their campaign committee and the whole structure. I think that's important. I don't think you can say that often enough because it does speak to the whole nature of the public foundation theory, which is private funding for public entities, is kind of an enlightened concept in and of itself. So the fact that it was taken on successfully, and we'll see the benefits of it later in this month of February, there is a lot to applaud.
You're absolutely correct, because the Heritage Foundation supports a city-operated entity, the Elmhurst Historical Museum. And these are community people who come together through the board to invest their time, their financial resources as well, and put their names on the line to support an entity that's operated by the city. And it really allows the Historical Museum to do so much more through the funding that we have from the Heritage Foundation.
So let's shift gears and go back and forth a little bit here. But okay, as museum professionals, This is kind of a unique opportunity to create a new exhibit in your home communities about your home community, and do it in such a way that it will be updatable as opposed to the relatively static exhibit that preceded this one. How unique an opportunity is that for both of you?
Well, I can say the exhibit program that we've been doing since I got here was purely the temporary changing exhibits, whether we create them ourselves or whether we host something. You know, this is a real opportunity from a curator standpoint, from an exhibit designer standpoint, to have a lasting legacy. This exhibit's going to be there for a long time. The previous one is any indication it'll be there for quite a while. So take that responsibility pretty seriously. That's why the planning stage takes longer. That's why the approach is examined by so many people. That's why you know, there are so many people involved, to be quite honest. But at the same time, these things don't come up every day. If you're a museum professional at an institution, you do not do a core exhibit every other year. You do a core exhibit. Some of the bigger institutions do larger temporary exhibits, but something that is core to your community, that where you're taking your community's history, your cultural history, and you're interpreting it, and you're putting it out there, and hoping that people will come enjoy this for a long period of time, is a unique opportunity, very important. Take it very seriously, and that's the approach that we've been doing all along. And we had a lot of involvement with the board members to make sure they knew where we were heading and how we were going to approach it, and they were very helpful. And they've actually been very helpful in making connections for people who might be featured in the exhibit. So, you know, we might talk about that at another time, but our board has really been our conduit to the community. For us, we are museum professionals and we're networked with other museum professionals. We utilize our public relations group to sort of get the word out, but our board really steps up and says, hey, you know, you should really interview this guy. He's lived here all his life and he did this and he did that and he's wonderful, and he really helps tell that particular theme in that particular category. And so they've been really wonderful at really being a conduit to the community.
You know, one of the things that I'm excited about with the new exhibit is the opportunity to showcase some of the collection. The Historical Museum started in 1957, so it's been collecting quite a while. And I think it stands way above many other local historical museums in its collecting. We have things in our collection that would not be available today, probably because of the value of antiques today, or because families close up houses and move and dispose of or otherwise get rid of things that otherwise may have come to the Historical Museum. So in those 50 years, the museum has amassed an extremely wonderful, broad collection that showcases the history of Elmhurst, and we'll be able to showcase that collection in the new exhibit. And because we'll be able to update it, we'll be changing out artifacts as well as some of the other features that are in the exhibit. So the exhibit will be constantly changing for visitors as they come back.
For people familiar with the Gloss Mansion, watching this program and perhaps being somewhat unaware of what's about to take place, the mansion itself is getting some upgrades in order to facilitate the visitor experience. Can you describe some of those?
Sure. One of the biggies is that we were able to get a grant from the state of Illinois to upgrade the HVAC system. The museum had always had radiators that kicked out the heat in the winter and actually kept it fairly comfortable, but had very limited air circulation. In the summertime, we had a very small amount of the museum was actually air conditioned. The rest of them were using window air conditioners, and they weren't very effective. And consequently, our patron experience wasn't as good as it could be. They weren't quite as comfortable as they probably should be coming into a museum. the state of Illinois had these opportunities to improve museums that were sitting on public property, and so we qualified and we went after it, and we were very fortunate to get the money that we needed to make these big upgrades. And it meant that we needed to close the museum down for a period of time, and so while it's been closed, we've been taking that opportunity to upgrade some of the other things. The first floor changing gallery is getting a facelift. The second floor is getting an amazing facelift with a new exhibit, but we're also doing a lot of things to the actual gallery space as well. It's getting new flooring, getting new lighting, and a lot of upgrades. So yeah, it's going to be quite a change for our patrons that have maybe seen it, over the last few years, and what it's going to look like now.
I think it's important to understand the nature of the exhibit. We've talked about how it will be able to be upgraded, but we're also talking about a pretty dramatic change in just the basic size of the exhibit. Recalling the previous one, it was a featured part of the second floor, but the second floor was also available with general space for other things. Mm-hmm. Now, the entire second floor becomes by all accounts, the story of Elmhurst. How was that decision made?
Well, what we realized was that Visions of Home being an effective exhibit was fine, but what we realized was that when we got more than a handful of people coming into the gallery at any one time, it really didn't allow for larger groups or groups coming in at all. There was this space that was adjacent to the Visions of Home that was previously used for programming before we had the Education Center, the building just south of the Gloss Mansion. So that space was always kind of like adjacent to this core exhibit, and we occasionally would throw up a little exhibit up there, but it was kind of, just sort of hanging out there. And because we got in the Education Center, we were doing hardly any programming in there, if any. So when it came time to, redo that second floor, we always kind of thought, well, we need more space anyway. And so we just engulfed that sort of 25 by 25 auditorium space that was there. And now we have about 1,700 square feet of gallery space on the second floor.
And the exhibit will take the entire second floor gallery space, and includes actually 3 different elements. Staff has worked very hard, especially Lance, on developing those 3 elements. So there'll be 3 experiences: a traditional gallery experience for visitors, and then we have a wonderful interactive tabletop map that's going to be the second major experience for visitors. And then the third experience is a traditional media room, or a documentary room, where visitors will be able to be seated and enjoy a 10-minute documentary about Elmhurst.
That's a perfect segue to the fact that we need to take our break, and we'll come back, and I want to talk about all 3 of those in greater detail. This is Elmhurst Time Travelers. We're talking to Brian Berghager and Lance Tauser about the new Elmhurst History exhibit, by all accounts, the story of Elmhurst. And we'll be right back.
Visit elmhurst.org to explore the new City of Elmhurst website. Find out the latest Elmhurst news, pay utility bills and parking tickets, report concerns, and much more. Elmhurst.org is an ideal way to discover what Elmhurst offers your business, your family, your life.
The Elmhurst Historical Museum, located in downtown Elmhurst, is proud to present award-winning exhibits for visitors of all ages. Our Adult Tea Time Talk series, family programs, and special events make learning about history interesting and fun. Admission is free, and on-site parking is available. Visit the Elmhurst Historical Museum soon. Call us today, or go to our website for the latest program details.
Welcome back. This is Elmhurst Time Travelers. We're talking with Brian Berghager and Lance Tauser. And gentlemen, we were just talking before the break about the new exhibit and its 3 very distinct components. So I want to talk about those things, but I want to talk about them in the sense of a preview, a walkthrough. The end of this month, it'll be open to the public. So I walk up the stairs in the Gloss Mansion, the very comfortable Gloss Mansion. I walk up the stairs in the Gloss Mansion, and what's the first thing I encounter?
Well, what you're going to encounter is a lot different than what you encountered the last time. There are three, as Brian mentioned before, there are three sort of separate elements to the exhibit. There's actually three different ways to experience the exhibit, maybe more if you really want to get abstract. But what we realized that when we have a certain amount of gallery space and we wanted these sort of signature media element experiences to have sort of a separate feel to the overall gallery space. So the traditional patron will walk up and hang a right and make their way through the main portion, the gallery portion of the exhibit, the interpretive portion of the exhibit, where they will see a lot of artifacts, they'll see a lot of interpretation, they'll see media, they'll see interviews, and they will really get a grasp of the history of Elmhurst. They'll then walk into sort of a separate sort of gallery space that actually is about 14 feet circle. It's a cyclorama. These walls form a perfect circle. And the idea here is that we wanted to be able to break down the geographical history of Elmhurst. Elmhurst has some definite unique qualities, and that's part of our job, is to try to explain them to our patrons and make people aware of what makes Elmhurst special. And one of the things is very geographical. Elmhurst has this creek that runs along the side of it. It has landmarks like a college, hospital. It had an airport on the north end. It had a quarry, still has quarries, and has these separate business districts and neighborhoods and communities that had changed over time. And we were looking for a way to show this unique quality of our cultural history. And what we decided to do was develop this unique sort of multi-user tabletop interactive experience that is in a setting. So this circular room, this cyclorama that I'm talking about, you have imagery, aerial photographs of Elmhurst that really provide this sort of context of what we're going to be talking about in this space. And this really wonderful, unique interactive, for the average patron that comes in, up to 4 or 5 people can address this thing at once and have different experiences. They'll be taking a little portal around our city and dialing up a decade and going, oh my gosh, there was a college, that's where the college was, or that's where the quarry is, and they'll get all sorts of information. There'll be photographs from our collection that are featured in this thing, but the actual layout of the land, so to speak, will change through time, through this interactive. And there's not only the experience of this tabletop interactive, but there'll be a monitor on the wall for people that maybe aren't interacting it, but they can actually see what's going on the wall as well as what's going on there. So this was really a unique approach. It was something that the foundation realized could be sort of an extra enhanced experience, and they actually raised their goal, their monetary goal, in order to make this happen. And so we felt that, you know, telling the geographical history of Elmhurst was so important because of our uniqueness, that they added it to their campaign and they made it happen, and it's going to be a wonderful experience. And then the next sort of section over is this traditional, let's sit people down, focus them, give them a surround sound sort of theater experience, really kind of allowing us as interpreters to kind of hammer home the take-home messages that we want people to walk away from. So they experience the exhibit as patrons do in their own way, whether they learn linearly or whether they learn thematically, or they like to watch videos of people telling their stories, or maybe they get something out of the geographical history, and in the end they sit down and they experience this theatrical experience that really kind of allows them to sort of walk away with, sort of that feeling of, wow, I get it, I sort of get it, but there's so much there, I've got to come back and see it. So we've really built in a lot of depth to our exhibit. We've built in a lot of content, these thematic eras that we've broken down, the traditional experience. They have, they have like 6 subsections for each era. So we have the settling era, we have the modernizing era, we have the boom after the war era, and we have sort of the rejuvenation era when we revitalized our downtowns and really kind of brought things up to modern day. So people will really kind of get a real grasp of what life was like, and there's a lot to take in.
Brian, how do you resonate to the themes as a museum professional?
Well, I think the thematic approach was right on with our exhibit. It's a new direction for museums. I think we're somewhat of a leader in this area. And I think it'll introduce our visitors at the Historical Museum to history of Elmhurst in a different way, and will draw them in, not so much focused on the traditional themes of local history, which is dates and names and facts. But it adds a human element when you're talking about things like a disaster that may have taken place in Elmhurst, or things like family and weddings and love. Those are so human, and oftentimes I think in a traditional chronologically based exhibit, the human side gets lost. And I think it's through the themes as well as through some of these accounts, these personal accounts, that we're really adding a human voice and a human arm that reaches out to our visitors and says,
the personalization of history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always, obviously history is personal. We all know that. Right. And yet in many ways, traditional presentation has turned it into, A, B, and C happened on, X dates. So this is a return to the personalization, if you will, for the people who made the history.
Right, yet it also tells a story about Elmhurst as a community. It tells the story of a community, of how Elmhurst became a place that people settled. And when people first settled in this place, there was no Elmhurst. In 1839, it was DuPage County. It wasn't even a township in 1839. It was in 1850 that the townships were created. So that's when York Township and Addison Township were created. And Elmhurst itself as a community didn't come about until about 1880 almost. And all of these things took place for reasons. And the exhibit will talk about the community at large as well.
I was going to ask both of you this question later on in the program, but I'm going to do it now because I don't want to run the risk of not having the opportunity to ask it. And that is that in the world that we live in collectively, and if you want to narrow it down to just our geographical area, how significant is it that in 2015 the Elmhurst Historical Museum is putting on a brand new exhibit, investing in a museum concept? If you will, what does that say about the culture of our community? We all know, all three of us know, that there are a number of quote-unquote historical museums around us. But I don't recall hearing too much about new exhibits and brand new storytelling and this kind of investment. What does that say about the museum in this town?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think it reflects some of the themes of the exhibit, which is that in Elmhurst, people become involved and get things done and embrace change and improvement, and look to Elmhurst as a community that is a good place to live and work and have a business. And I think the exhibit itself reflects that for the Historical Museum and the Elmhurst community writ large, so to speak.
Yeah, I would add to that I've conducted a lot of interviews with people that live and work and served as public officials in Elmhurst. And the theme that has come from it, that Elmhurst is a community of engaged citizens. They voice their opinion at city council meetings. They pitch in when they need to pitch in. They care about the community. People don't argue for a year and a half over the height of a parking deck if they don't care. So it makes it sometimes tough to move projects along, but I think it is reflective of a community that cares. And so we see that in everyday patrons coming through. The appreciation for us being there, the appreciation for doing the work that we do, saving the history of our town, and then interpreting the history of our town. We're doing it because it comes back to us as appreciation. They have demonstrated that with how they've funded this new exhibit and where this money has come from. It's not come from corporations that don't have a vested interest in Elmhurst. It's come from the pockets of the people that live here, and I think that's a good story. And I think you're right from a standpoint of Brian's sort of been talking about local history museums. It's not unprecedented, but it's actually quite impressive that in this day and age, when people feel they can get anything they want online, to have the community come together and invest in a new exhibit to be here for the next however many years, and the interest in wanting to interpret our history, I think says a lot, and I think it's reflective of an engaged community.
I want to go back to the Heritage Foundation's role and even the fundraising role a little bit. $300,000 is a lot of money by anyone's purview. You actually mentioned, Lance, in the first half of the program, some significant gifts. But Brian, I'm going to turn to you. As I understand it, about half of that amount came from 3 donors. Is that correct?
Well, yes, and as I mentioned earlier, the boards stood up first and said,
yes,
we want to be part of this. We're putting ourselves behind this project. And then we also spoke with the Bates Foundation here in Elmhurst, and the Bates family is a longtime Elmhurst family, has a connection to the Gloss Mansion as well. And the Bates Foundation and Bates family were extremely interested in our project and came on board early on, and were able to be what we would call a lead donor. We were able to use the Bates Foundation support pledge for our exhibit to sell the exhibit to other donors. And it wasn't too long after that that members of the Cross family came to us with an offer of an extremely large donation to our Visionary Voice campaign. That was a result of a longtime volunteer and supporter of the Historical Museum, Ted Cross. Ted and his brother Bob were born here in Elmhurst, lived just a few blocks away from the Historical Museum, and both passed away within just a few months of one another in 2011, I believe. And after their passing, members of the Cross family felt that a major gift to our effort, our campaign for a new exhibit, would be a lasting memorial for both Ted and Bob. So we were extremely grateful for their kindness and thoughtfulness.
Let's talk about how this will roll out. The public opening is February 28th and March the 1st. How will that happen?
Well, a lot of hard work.
Exactly.
Well, the galleries will be open, both the first floor gallery, where we have a wonderful traveling exhibit called Let Children Be Children from the George Eastman House. And then, of course, the By All Accounts exhibit is on the second floor. And we welcome visitors from Elmhurst and from surrounding communities as well to turn out that weekend, that Saturday and Sunday, to visit with us on the inaugural weekend. Staff members will be throughout the museum to talk with our visitors. We won't be doing personal tours at the time, just given the nature of how that day is going to roll out. But we'll also have live music and children's craft activities and refreshments in the Education Center, which is our programming space next door to the Gloss Mansion. There'll also be a giant mural for kids to participate in, and they'll be able to create their own account book or diary book at the event as well. And there'll be some fun trivia for adults. So that weekend's going to be, I think, fun for adults as well as kids.
How does a new exhibit like this change your respective roles at the museum going forward?
Well, as we said before, we're building in a fair amount of flexibility to the exhibit moving forward. So we'll be moving from a phase of exhibit development, exhibit installation, to sort of then in using the exhibit and interpreting the exhibit, building programs around the exhibit, and then sort of planning the next few years as to how we're going to enhance it, how we're going to change it. Maybe it will be a new media feature in our little mini theater. Maybe there'll be other aspects that we go after. I think what we're going to continue to do is make sure that we're still gathering the stories. Make sure that people know when they come to the museum that it's a repository not only for artifacts and photographs, but for their stories. And so I think there'll be a real effort in getting feedback from our patrons. How did they react to the exhibit? What resonated with them? What was it too complicated? Was there too much information? Was there not enough information? I think that's an active approach that we're going to take moving forward. So my role as curator, the exhibit gets up, hopefully people like it, but at the same time, getting feedback as it will be very beneficial to how we go about planning and altering it in some ways and adding to it and swapping things out. There are certain things that we've already built in. There are certain artifacts that you need to rotate. They shouldn't be in the light. Papers and sometimes some fabrics and textiles just need to be rotated because it's, as stewards of our collection, as someone who is responsible for making sure that these last a long time, having them on an exhibit is wonderful. Not necessarily wonderful for the object. So part of our role is to look at what's on exhibit and figure out what materials should be swapped out as we go.
We've got about 2 minutes left in our program, and I want to give both of you the opportunity to, the new exhibit is going to be spectacular and everybody should come see it, not necessarily everybody on that one weekend. What else will be happening at the museum in 2015 in terms of exhibits and activity?
Sure, I'll give you the exhibit stuff and then
Okay.
Brian can fill you in
Great.
on everything else. So as Brian mentioned, we currently have Let Children Be Children, a traveling photographic exhibit from the Eastman House on child labor from Louis Wicks Hines. In the summer, we're going to be renting an exhibit from the Charles Schultz Museum. It's called Pigskin Peanuts. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be getting the Elmhurst Travelers team back together, and we're going to host an exhibit that I think the entire family would really enjoy. The exhibit that we're currently producing in-house for this year, for 2015, is one on Chicago and Elmhurst, for that matter, brewing history, beer history. Elmhurst has a beer history. We have a German heritage. We're going to develop another one of these exhibits that has sort of a regional appeal, but has Elmhurst connections. And that exhibit is going to travel around the region. But it's going to start here in Elmhurst, and that will be in the fall, Oktoberfest, and it's going to really round out a really wonderful year with the new by all accounts exhibit and everything else we're doing.
I think folks will be hearing more about the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation too in the coming year. We had a great group of people involved with this campaign. Val Stewart and Willis Johnson were co-chairs of our campaign for 2 years here, and they deserve a lot of credit. Willis, along with his wife Shirley, own and operate York Theater. And Kathy Jordan, president of our board currently, has also been actively involved. So the leadership of our Heritage Foundation will continue to do their fundraising and advocacy throughout the year.
Gentlemen, we don't have any more time, but the most important thing, or one of the more important things of this program is to have people watch it and put on their calendars the February 28, March 1, by all accounts, the history of Elmhurst. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
This has been Elmhurst Time Travelers, and this edition devoted to an exciting new exhibit coming your way very shortly. Brian Berghager, Lance Tauser, I'm Ken Bartels, and we'll see you again.
The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the Churchville Schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the Civil War era. Students of today walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm of the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville Schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons. And children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are practiced, and students test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess featuring games of the early 1900s. The schoolhouse is a popular place for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can also be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst Historical Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information. Call 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. The Churchville Schoolhouse is waiting to open the doors for your school or community group. Plan a memorable learning experience today for the best education in history.